You can't innovate your way out of this. You can't use technology. These things just will not work. There won't be a government policy that will come and save you. The best way to get over coming from a bad family is to build a better one. There's no other way.
Hi, welcome to Jeremy Pryor's podcast, or what I like to call Jeremy Pryor Unfiltered. I'm his daughter and producer, Kelsey Gall, and we are excited to bring you seasons of content all the way from Tolkien to theology, from business to family. If you like to contemplate deep philosophical ideas across a wide range of topics, you've come to the right place. Make sure you give us a follow so you don't miss out on future episodes.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. We're with my daughter, Sydney, the sewer of curtains. Congratulations, Sydney. You've
Thank
now
you.
a new title.
Wow. Just from one day of sewing curtains, I get it.
Yeah, you could start your own Etsy shop. It's just, who knows how far this could go. It's going to be amazing. Okay. We live, Sydney Grace, in what Freya, India calls the Age of Abandonment. So I wanted to read this article with you and just kind of discuss her article. I think this is so Freya India. I don't know. I'm not quite sure who she is, but she wrote. So this is the subtitle is "We simply don't believe anyone will stay." And there's some very sad TikTok screenshots of crying girls who are saying things like, "I have abandonment issues," or "No one talks about how your childhood affects your relationships. Fear of abandonment and overthinking about people leaving you all the time sucks." I do think this is a big problem. And she articulates in the article this reality that I think we really need to grapple with, because I know a lot of us are very committed to building multi-generational families that stand the test of time. So we want to be constantly, and when we do, through this podcast and others, try to figure out what are the elements for that kind of long-term commitment. But it's important that we understand that even if we do succeed in building multi-generational families that stay together, we are in an age of abandonment. Everywhere around us are people who are suffering the challenges that come from feeling like relationships are not stable. So let me read some of this stuff and I'll just reflect and let me get your thoughts on this. So I've written a lot about my generation and fear, our fear of love and fear of life. But I've been getting the sense lately that there's some ultimate fear underlying all this, running through everything. And I'm becoming convinced that it's fear of abandonment. For a start, many of us grew up in broken homes. Our parents are strangers to one another. Our childhood, a series of exchanges from one house to the next. No real home, no place to belong. By age 14, nearly half of firstborn children in the UK no longer live with both their mother and father. Of course, families have fallen apart in every generation. But even a few decades ago, children from broken homes had communities. They had neighborhoods. Now our families fall apart and there is nobody to catch us. We live far from extended family. We are more estranged than ever. And I can't get across how little familiarity Gen Z has with community. When some of us hear the word community, we think of Instagram, we think of Reddit, or abstract concepts like the LGBT community or mental health communities, nothing real or solid. Which is why whenever someone says something like online communities are lifelong for young people, I feel like screaming because it's so bleak. What have we done? Plus, total abandonment of any sense that we belong to something bigger. Loss of faith, not just in religion, but in all social bonds. No sense that there's anything binding us, that we even share the same values. Forget loving our neighbor, we can't even make eye contact with them. Nothing holds us together anymore. We are alone. And add to all of that so little sympathy. Ours is a culture choking on its own compassion, yet offering next to none for children of divorce. We are the first generation to grow up without stigma around family breakdown, but near total normalization of it. And when you normalize something, you stigmatize the reaction. So many marriages end. What did you expect? Your friends, family are the same. What's wrong with you? It's just a contract anyway. Kids are resilient. All this tells us that abandonment is trivial, that if you feel deeply affected by it, you might be the problem. And anyone who does try to articulate the pain is treated with suspicion, accused of having some political agenda, rather than just being overcome with this feeling of absolute abandonment. All right, I'll pause here for a second. Oof, man. I just think this is like a heart cry of somebody who really does, I think, understand the problem. That last point that she made, I think it cannot be overstated, right? This is everything is seen through a political lens today. And so if they're fighting to normalize or give freedom for divorce, then you're not allowed to grieve the abandonment as a child of divorce. Like this is the tension or the crazy reality that we're all really trying to have compassion for the women who need more freedom from their husbands. And therefore, in order to maximize our compassion to those women, we need to make sure that we show no compassion to the children of divorce, right? Like this is the weird thing that's happening. And then in order to have compassion for trans people, we need to make sure that we have no compassion for women who need to have women-only spaces in order to protect them, or sports that they need to compete in so that they can actually succeed against other women. Like we have to pick who we're having compassion towards, and then we have to choose to completely abandon the other person who is being impacted by the decisions that are being made. That is very well stated. I don't feel like that's been said enough, and I think that's a huge problem that we've created through this very strange, almost political compassion movement. But yeah, what are things that article so far is stirring up for you?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that in order to have compassion for one group, we have to stop having compassion for another. Um, and I feel like the children almost always get the bad end of the stick here, which is really terrible because they're the ones that need the protection the most. With divorce, I'm curious if any negative things have happened because of surrogacy for children who are results of surrogacy. Like, I'm
Yes.
curious if there's some, like, now having a sister that has had 2 children, and she's told me all about all this stuff that happens in the development that happens in the newborn stage, and how important it is that they are with their mother for, like, the entirety of it and things like that. I'm like, how does this work for children who are taken away from their mothers at such a young age? Like, how does this work both with mothers who don't want their children, who wanna give them up for adoption because they want to pursue something else, and, for surrogate mothers and things like
Yes.
that. Like, there's so many things that, so many political issues that we decide to have compassion on, and then to the detriment of a different group. So that is really interesting, but I feel like that normalizing part that she said was so really resonated with what I've seen of these families that have come from divorced um, backgrounds. I'm just like, this is so normal now. I don't
Right.
know if they realize what a big deal it is.
Right.
And this really became so real when I went to public school for a year. And it was just so wild that I was one of the only children in that entire school of thousands of students that had parents that were still together. And, like, all of us were living in the same house. None of you had been, like, married before, so I didn't have, like, step siblings or anything. Like, it was just so wild to hear about that. In particular, my acting class, you can imagine these kids that are into acting, for some reason, they just all come from messed up backgrounds. And I remember there was one classmate I had that had their parents still together, and she was like, they should get a divorce. They fight so much that it's like terrible. They should get a divorce. I'm like, you're the only one besides me that has parents still together, and you think that. So that it's just so wild. And I wanted to talk about more of, like, well, that affects you. That kind of screws you up in some way, but it feels so bad to say because of how normalized it is. Like, what are you trying to say? Like,
Yes.
this is normal. Like, if you were to talk about the ways that would mess you up, that would be, like, politically incorrect.
Right.
Because that was the parents' choice. Like, they had to do what they wanted to. So,
Yeah, you can imagine a world in which this happened in Israel. You could perform some social experiment like they did in the kibbutzim, which is they basically took children away from their parents and raised them collectively. And it normalized. The kids didn't know anything else. All the other kids in their life were also, being raised collectively. And so as long as kids were raised that way and it was all normal, then they're not going to have any psychological problems from it, right? ... Now they've actually done the research. It was just so devastating to those children. Like these kids had almost an impossible time forming attachments in relationship It was such a complete disaster of a social experiment. And I think we have to be so careful. There is a clear way in which children were designed to be raised. And you can normalize a completely different way, but you're still going to do the damage. And that's kind of her point here.
Have you ever considered starting a family business so you can spend more time working as a family team? We've started a year-long coaching program called Family Inc., where you get weekly coaching with Jeremy, access to our video training for launching family businesses, and lots of ideas for businesses to start that are working for other family teams. Head over to familyteams.com and click Family Inc. to learn more, or to set up a strategy call with Jeremy to see if this might be a good fit for you.
All right, we'll keep reading. The feeling we're left with, man, how do I describe it? It's the feeling that nobody has our back, that we can't trust anyone. This world is terrifying and we are powerless. But if we attach to anything for support, we will be abandoned. I see it everywhere. It cuts to the core of this generation. Difficulty trusting people, hypersensitivity to criticism, low self-esteem, constant need for external validation. All are abandonment symptoms. And I'm not saying that this explains everything or we all feel this way, but that we underestimate how many young people are carrying this around. This feeling of being abandoned and fear of it happening again. Beneath what looks like the age of entitlement, below the culture of narcissism, this is the age of abandonment. For one, fear of abandonment explains much of Gen Z's lack of resilience. We fear life because we feel alone. There's the thing that about attachment, you need to be independent. You need a stable base to venture out, something to rely on to take risks, some stability to cope with chaos. Otherwise, you can't explore with confidence. If you fear abandonment, you won't risk romance. Words will feel traumatic. You will stay stagnant, afraid to move. Maybe this generation is slow to grow up because we have no foundation to fall back on. How can we stand on our own 2 feet when the ground keeps crumbling beneath us? Fear of abandonment can also explain much more culturally. I think the lesson many of us took from being left was to aim fire at marriage. Can't blame our parents, we love them, so blame the institution. Burn it to the ground. Smile as it burns. Laugh at anyone who runs into the flames. It destroyed our family, so we'll destroy it. And I don't mean those simply choosing not to marry or have children, but who talk about these commitments with utter contempt. I think the root of that is fear, not feeling safe. When young women rage against marriage and motherhood so viscerally, what I'm really hearing is it's not safe to marry. It's not safe to have kids. Why would you risk it? I see conservatives mock young women speaking like this, but listen, they've clearly got something to say. What if they're trying to say, this doesn't work? If it does work, then why was I abandoned? This is the thing that broke me. Why would I go near it? If it's so easy, how come my parents couldn't hold it together? That's what I hear in chemistry is a red flag, in marriage is a trap. And I think this is a major and often missing explanation for failing marriage and birth rates. Maybe it's not selfishness. Maybe it's not narcissism. Maybe deep down at the heart of it, we are terrified someone will walk out, that they will decide one day to give up, that even if we gave it our all, it would never be good enough. We simply don't believe anyone will stay. It explains some of the extreme feminist sentiments too. The first man I ever relied on walked out. So F men, red pill as well. Women give up, so why bother? We decided the answer is resistance to love, to declare it unreachable. No need for families. Dismantle the ideals. Take down the traditions. Vilify all men. Mock fathers. No heroes allowed. Love isn't real anyway. Hear about a good, healthy marriage and do all we can to debunk it. Our response is not to try to take family less seriously, to put less of ourselves into relationship, but do it all half-heartedly so it hurts less in the end. So, yeah, what do you think of her thesis about this is the real mocking, the attack that so many are leveling against marriage, feminism, or feminists are against marriage, anything traditional it broke them. It didn't work for them.
I definitely think it makes sense. I think it's definitely part of the problem and maybe even goes further down to the roots that, like she was saying, maybe that's what's behind the age of entitlement and the culture of narcissism. Like maybe that's more of the fruit of this, but maybe the root of it is such a deep-seated fear of abandonment that this is what our culture has become. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like clearly, like I was saying, whenever I venture out into the world and seeing just how jaded people are, it's like this must come from somewhere. And it must come from just how you were raised, the world that you thought you grew up in. I think that just forms so much of how a person thinks. Like for me, I feel like she was saying you need something stable in order to grow out of. You talk about our ceiling is our children's floor. Like you've worked to make a foundation for us so that we feel safe enough to venture out and do what we want and do what we need to build our own families and things like that, all because we have a community to fall back on. I can't even imagine what that would be like to not have that. And it would feel so dangerous all the time. Like if I fail and I'm done. So why try on something that can fail so spectacularly? It makes sense that they would try and go for something that is completely reliant on themselves, like a career, where just hard work will do it for you, instead of a relationship, which would require someone's commitment and someone else's love, and you need to depend on them not to leave. So things like that, I get that when you dive into the actual psychology that these people develop after having grown up this way, it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, man, it is really tough. In the Bible, when Jesus says that the church is like salt, I really think, that we have to, primarily, of course, in that age, salt was a preserving agent. That something really devastating will come upon the earth if we don't properly salt the earth. If there is not strong families that are demonstrating what covenant keeping looks like, what fatherhood is and motherhood is and sonship is and daughterhood is, because the result is you get these people who understandably have had terrible experiences with those traditions and those institutions, and like you said, they're going to try to destroy them, and they're going to support the institutions that they feel did serve them or can be relied upon. Maybe the government is stronger, maybe the academy, there may be some other community, like she was saying, about the, like, LGBT community. Maybe there's a community out there that I can be a part of. And this thing that she's describing that has been unleashed on the earth through the destruction of marriage and family, it reminds me a lot of, in Malachi at the very end. God says this really remarkable thing, and he says that the spirit of Elijah must come and turn the hearts of fathers to their children and children to the fathers. Otherwise, I will come and curse the land with the curse of utter destruction. That if there's a breakdown between the connection between fathers and children and fathers, that is, he's saying, inspired by the spirit of Elijah, then there's a curse that's unleashed upon the earth that just sort of like continues to unmake and undo everything. And I can't help but just, I'm hearing like the resonance of that curse, like as it's blowing up. Because you kind of go all the way back to, like, where did this start? And I think in so many situations, may not have been in this generation, but maybe in the last generation, one generation ago, two generations ago, there was a man who decided he didn't want to stay in that marriage. There was a father who decided he didn't want to fight for those children. There was a man who decided to emotionally disconnect. Now there is a lot can be said for, I'm sure there's many people to blame, but of course, a daughter being raised by a man like that is going to come out differently. She's going to have different intuitions about whether or not men are reliable, whether or not God can be trusted. And then you have the inevitable results in the next generation. And so we constantly are living in this sort of multi-generational story, whether we like it or not. That's the way God made the world. And so there is a danger. And this is why I think the solution ultimately is we have to get fathers who maybe have experienced abandonment, who maybe have never experienced that kind of solidity, to choose to stick with a family and to raise their children and to draw that deep emotional connection and to heal those things that have been destroyed. I don't know any other solution. All right. We'll kind of do one more reading from this essay. Same goes with our attraction to therapy culture. This is why I find the obsession with self-love and self-reliance deeply sad. There are young women whose families fell apart and who their whole lives dreamed of nothing but a stable, lasting love to depend on, and are now being told that's pathological, that's needy. They should love themselves more. If you dream of depending on someone, then damn, you've got issues. I see in so much of therapy culture young people's desperate to be loved and trying to train themselves out of it. I see so much abandonment pain. We are reparenting ourselves. We are self-soothing. We are healing our inner child. Nobody's asking why. Please, will somebody step in and say to this generation that maybe they don't need more self-love, more belief in themselves, but something to belong to? And so not only did our families fall apart, not only were we not able to talk about it, but we grew up and got it drilled into us that the problem is dependence. Don't be needy. The worst thing that can happen to women is ending up with someone they need.
Wow.
What's love then, if it isn't that? Why be with someone you don't need? Our identity, our meaning, our purpose as humans was always our ties and obligations to others. And now we are trying to do it all alone, trying to figure out who we are alone, and we're nobody alone. No wonder we're confused. And for many of us, life has become about trying to heal or hide this thing, shoving it down, this basic human need to belong, which is why criticism from older generations can be hard to take. No wonder we are scared, dependent on you. Why don't young people take family seriously? Why don't they appreciate meaningful relationships? Maybe because the most meaningful relationships we had, our very first ones, fell to pieces. No wonder we are hooking up and settling for situationships. We haven't lost sight of what's important. We were never shown what was important. And no wonder we don't want kids. We were kids when we got left. What I'm saying is calling Gen Z selfish and entitled won't help. And maybe it's time to try something more like, wow, we get it. That was hard. Sorry about the ripping up all the roots, the breaking down of support systems. Sorry you were let down as a little girl and that you're here struggling to convince yourself that love even exists. Maybe if we let young people talk about it, if we listened, it wouldn't come out in these weird ways, cloaked in therapy speak and anger against all men or the refusal to grow up and get hurt. But the real reasons we don't want to know. We stick with young adults. Young adults aren't settling down because they can't get on the housing ladder or because wokeness is brainwashing them. Because if we go any further past that, down below, we might get too close to the truth, the hard truth, like the fact that for many girls, the first man to break their hearts was their father. That some young women today haven't had a single example of a marriage making it. And maybe the problem isn't so much that young people can't buy a home, it's that they can't build one. They don't know what it's like to belong to one. Get me on the housing ladder, great. But how does that help if I have no idea what healthy love looks like? If I don't trust anyone will stay? Better to pretend that Gen Z just needs new policies to get on government schemes to tax the rich than accept that what many young people need more than anything else is an apology, recognition of what happened, acknowledgement of the abandonment and how alone we feel. So I think one of the things that, there's layers to what she's describing there. But I think the thing that is really important that she's saying is we have to tell young people the truth. We have to say, you are messed up. I'm sorry you're messed up. And you're messed up because you actually were designed to be born into a stable, loving marriage where a mother and a father, or your biological mother and father, would have loved you all the way through your childhood and would have fought and done everything they can to help you succeed and build a new branch of the family when you became an adult. That's what you were designed for. That's what you have those needs. Those needs were not met. You were abandoned. And if you want to experience the love and the essence of home and the essence of belonging, then you're going to need to acknowledge that truth that you were in many ways, badly injured by your past, but that the only way forward is if you're acknowledging that truth, is to build those things. Like you're not going to find a perfect replacement any other way. Like you can't innovate your way out of this. You can't use technology. These things just will not work. There won't be a government policy that will come and save you. Like the best way to get over coming from a bad family is to build a better one. There's no other way.
Are you following us on Facebook and Instagram yet? Look up @FamilyTeams to get even more free content and never miss out on event announcements.
So what does this stir up for you? What are your any other thoughts on this part of the essay?
Yeah, I really love articles like this because I think that she's just really well articulating so many things at once. Like there's so many of what I see that is broken in our culture right now. Like it's such a huge problem that it's really hard to even articulate when you try. And I feel like she's doing it in a really good way where she's starting at the root and then going up into seeing all these things around us. Like we're seeing people just stop respecting themselves with the hookup culture and everything that she mentioned. And just I've seen so many of these like symptoms and so many of the things that I just think are ridiculous. I'm like, that stuff, like, the people that she's referencing in here, like that's kind of me. I'm like, oh, why can't you take family seriously? Why don't you appreciate meaningful relationship? Like that's kind of what I think sometimes when I see these women and behaving this way. But I think that she's doing a good job of like, here's why. Here's the answer to that.
Yes.
Because we've never seen a good example of that. We've growing up, we never saw a good example of a marriage. Like that would totally mess you up and that would totally turn you off to the idea that, like earlier she mentioned, like, let's burn this institution down and like laugh as other people run into it. Like that totally makes sense. Like when you see these trad wives, like traditional wives on social media and the way everyone's just like laughing at them, like you have no idea what you just signed up for. It screwed my family up and all these other families that I was best friends with, their children. Like I know so many examples of families that are now in ruins because of the institution of marriage. And like when that is your reality, that is the lens that you're going to view everything else in. And there is an absurd percentage of people that think exactly like that. And we're really a result of that generation. Like I kind of wonder where it starts, like if it started with the world wars, because like all the men were depressed and traumatized from the wars and they became
Yeah.
super absent. And then the birth control pill was introduced soon after that. So like we're clearly a result of whatever was started back then with the breakdown of the family. And like where did it start? I really wonder, but clearly this is where we end up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. There was kind of a cascade, I think, effect of you have industrialization completely redefining what fatherhood looks like. It wasn't leading a family in and through the home, like to do work, on the farm or in the trade, but all integrated with your family. Now it's disconnected from family. And then we sent men off to industrial wars and they endured, all kinds of trauma, that happening just after the Great Depression, where things completely outside of their control, but because of a massive scale industrial economy, you could be building a farm and lose everything, no matter how hard you worked. And so I think this is deeply confusing. So I think you had many, many decades of just disruption. And then I think that coming out of the ruins of all of that was like all this technological freedom, which, like the birth control pill. And I think that, then there was sort of an innovation of like, okay, well, let's build a different kind of family. And I think from there, we innovated our way into oblivion. Like now we're in a situation where we're so far removed from the root structures of what the family was designed to do and be that people can't even remember. And one of the things she's saying in this that I really, was struck by was that the thing being told to women in particular was don't be needy, don't be dependent. But she says really well, our identity, our meaning, our purpose as humans was always our ties with and obligations to others. And now we are trying to do it all alone, trying to figure out who we are alone. And we're nobody alone. No wonder we're confused. Like that is my favorite line, maybe the whole article so
Mhm.
far was just like, she just put her finger on it. Like, that is a lie. We are lying to women by saying the answer out of this is independence. That is not the answer. But it is the actual answer for many of them is even more terrifying, which is the answer is dependence, is that you should actually make a covenant with a man, assume that he's going to and act as if and live as if he's going to be faithful to you for the rest of your life, make yourself completely dependent on him, become maximally vulnerable, maximize the cost of divorce on you as a woman, in order to build the kind of family that will actually stand the test of time. That is a terrifying solution to this problem, but I don't think there is another solution. And so this is profound catch-22, particularly for women in the way she's describing it here.
Yeah, that line, "The worst thing that can happen to women is ending up with someone they need," was really crazy. Um, Especially I feel like I'm just really meditating on the whole marriage thing because I'm about to get married. So I'm like, the essence of this of marriage is so much like dependency on each other, the codependency and um like interdependency and just both of you contributing something that the other needs very much to the relationship. And it's just like you thrive that way, especially men and women. We were just a dream team. Um, and just the essence of like she's saying, what's love then if it isn't that? Why be with someone you don't need? It just removes the meaning of it if you try to be so independent that you don't even need anyone. It's like, why get married? Why have any relationships if you don't need anyone? So, and when you think about it, when women just go after the careers and try to become independent, what they really need is attachment. And what they need is something to love and someone to love them. Um, but then that's their worst fear. Is becoming attached to someone and then leaving. And so they have to be able to face their fears in order to get what they want and what they need in life. And that's just impossible for some of them. And I understand why. But like you're saying, it is the solution. The only way to overcome that is to face their fear and actually take that risk and do the thing that they have always dreaded and that ruins their life to begin with. So it is such a terrible dilemma.
Yeah. Oof. Well, this was challenging, and I think, a little bit of a depressing thing to explore, but I think so important because, for so many people that are listening to this, you may have come from some of these broken families. You may be in your generation recovering for your children, your grandchildren, a family that is whole, and that they won't know what the women that she's describing are living with. That your children will understand healthy attachment, and so there has to be truth spoken that there really is no plan B. You cannot form some alternate community. Nothing kind of drives me more crazy than hearing people make the case against family because it broke down and now we need to come up with some alternate kinds of communities. That is
Yeah.
not going to work. It's just going to perpetuate the problem and it's going to obfuscate the solution. We need to make clear that we are family designed creatures. We are designed for mothers and fathers and sonship and daughterhood. And anything you do to make that more difficult or more confusing to see is going to hurt more people. And so we have to encourage each other to recover from the challenges that came from our past and to build better and better families and households. And so that's what we're here to really help y'all do. I have tremendous hope that it's possible. I think that, a lot of what our work has been about has been making clear that we have been attempting to build family with the wrong blueprint. This sort of modern blueprint of the springboard for individual success leads to this kind of breakdown because it says to both the father and the mother, the family is there for their individual needs primarily. And of course, the chance that that's going to create divorce is so high and then create the instability that creates this multi-generational, problems with attachment. So yeah, we need to be really advocating for the biblical blueprint of family. It's a multi-generational team on mission that we're designed to work together to live a kind of lifestyle in which we are interdependent, that those dependencies are positive. Those dependencies are what make marriage and family meaningful. And that when you maximize those dependencies, you go much further. Like on any team, if any team said, well, I'm on this football team, but I'm not the quarterback, I'm the lineman, but I don't really trust the quarterback. And so I'm not going to pay any attention. No, of course that team's going to lose every single game. Like you have to go into the game no matter how much your quarterback is struggling or your running back is struggling or whatever member of the team is struggling, you still have to do your job. You still have to understand that there's a design of this team and that we're still totally dependent on each person doing their part. There really is not another way to go. So hard to swallow, hard pill, right?
Yeah, it's for real. And I just want to say, like you were saying earlier, I think there's probably a lot of people listening that did come from that background and are now starting families of their own. And I just want to say thank you to them and just like validate, I guess, validate their experiences because they did face their fears, like we were talking about, in order to actually overcome this curse. The only way to do it is to do the thing that they are deathly afraid of and the thing that may have ruined their life, to actually attempt to succeed at it. And that's so brave. I think that people with stories like that are just so powerful because they've actually experienced that. Like we both came from pretty stable backgrounds, so it's like there's kind of limited power behind our statements with that and our stories. But I think people that actually did come from those backgrounds and have now overcome it, that's just so powerful. And I think their testimonies are just really amazing. And just anyone that's listening, I guess, that has gone through that, I think that's amazing. And
Yes.
you guys are very brave.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to close on. Just a little bit more of a hopeful note.
Amen. Awesome. Thanks, Sid.
Thank you for listening to Jeremy Pryor's podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any future content. Follow Jeremy on Twitter and Instagram as well as his Substack blog, all linked in the description. See you next time.